Welcome to yet another English language video with me, Paul, from the AQA Darlington. And on this one, what I want to do is just give you some final advice on your short story narrative fiction writing. Okay, so here we go. The first golden rule, I suppose, of creative writing is show, don't tell. It's the kind of cardinal rule that is taught to you if you ever go on a creative writing course anywhere in the world. Show, don't tell. By which I mean, listen to this, it seemed to Myop as she skipped lightly from her house to pig pen to smokehouse that the days had never been as beautiful as these. Right, now Alice Walker, the writer of this, it's from the first sentence from the short story The Flowers. She could have simply put that Myop felt extremely happy, but that would be a fairly weak opening, wouldn't it? And so what she's doing is that she's showing rather than telling. She's showing by describing Myop as skipping, so she's using that material verb, and then she's giving us visual images of where she is, from hen house to pig pen to smokehouse, so that we, as the audience, we kind of infer her kind of state of mind. So always try to show rather than tell. And related to that, imply rather than state, because the main thing about short stories is that they tend to be understated and subtle. So the most dramatic thing that you can do is through implicature, by implying things rather than overtly stating them. And that makes it more fun to read, doesn't it? Because we as the reader then get to infer things. Thirdly, focus on the characterization and the mood rather than overloading your short story with a whole load of plot twists. Look, you've only got 750 words. This is not a Hollywood movie that you're producing. And the most important thing is that the reader thinks and cares about your characters. Okay, so make sure that you invest heavily in the characters and the mood, and don't spend too long dreaming up artificial plot lines. Another golden rule of creative writing is write from your own experience and observations. For some bizarre reason, lots of my students, once they start writing, go into Americana, because they're so saturated by American culture and they've watched so many American TV programs and films that they have characters who talk with each other in kind of American style accents and dialects, that their view of the places where people are living tends to be American. Don't do that. Write from your own experience and your own observations. We want something that feels true and authentic, rather than kind of like borrowed experiences that you've had from watching films and TV shows. Focus on one time and one place. Because this is a short story, you haven't got a whole load of words to be going here, there and everywhere, setting up orientation of these different settings and different time scales. So keep it nicely focused just on one time and one place. And again, related to that, keep it minimal in terms of characters. So a maximum of 3 main characters. I mean, some people do very successful short stories with only 1 character in it. It goes without saying that you need to be drawing upon some of the stylistic features of your style model in your actual short story. Otherwise, what would be the point of choosing a style model? This is very, very important. So at a simple level, if your style model is using first-person pronouns all the way through, because it's in the narrative perspective is first person, then that's obviously a good idea for you to be choosing as a perspective yourself. And then that will enable you in your commentary to make good linkages between the decisions that you've made linguistically on your short story and the choices that the writer has made in the style model short story. Okay. Dialogue's really useful because it gives variety to your story. Because when people speak with each other, they don't tend to just declare, they exclaim, they ask questions, they give instructions. So you've got a whole variety of different sentence functions. But more importantly than that, it gives you clues into characterization. So when people start to open their mouths, we begin to infer things about their character, about their background, about their social class, about maybe their age, and therefore it saves you having to explain these things in the prose. And finally, on this slide, use setting. Use setting by doing really interesting, short but crisp descriptions of the environment and the weather. So this is called pathetic fallacy, isn't it? Where you describe the setting and it has some kind of impact on how we think about the characters. Let's just have a look at a couple of examples. So I'm going to just show you two bits of narrative fiction, which shows and which tells. He was a middle-aged family man, married with 2 children, Harry aged 8 and Amelia aged 2. What do you think? Now, is this showing or is this telling? Well, I would say this is telling, right? It's not, in fact, telling us anything very interesting about the person, or at least it's not engaging us very much. I mean, what is meant by a family man? Harry and Amelia, okay, we've got their names and their ages, but this doesn't really give us a clue about anything of their characters. So it's fairly limited in terms of narrative drive. Compare with this. He carefully wiped the toast crumbs from his daughter's mouth, struggling to answer his son Tom's incessant queries about the extinction of dinosaurs. Now that is showing rather than telling, isn't it? And we can infer a lot of the details that have been stated there from the details that we've got here. We can tell that this person is probably middle-aged because there he is dealing with his 2 children. He seems to be, in some senses, a family person because he's engaging with his children. And the details that we get about the children are much more interesting than simply their age. Okay, we know that the daughter must be young because the father is wiping the toast crumbs from his daughter's mouth. We know that it's hard work, this, being a parent. So the father is struggling to answer his son's incessant queries about the extinction of dinosaurs. So that gives you a clue at maybe his age and his enthusiasm and something about his character. So there's a good example of showing rather than telling. Okay, let's go back to the overall advice on drafting your narrative. Make your title intriguing. Now, your title is your golden opportunity to arouse curiosity in your reader. So please take the time to make it as interesting, as intriguing as possible. Keep your verb tense consistent throughout. Yes. Now, this is something that students sometimes fall flat on because they might start a story in the past tense, and then as the story develops, suddenly, for no apparent reason, they start drifting into the present, and then they may go back to past. So keep the consistency all the way through. If you start off in the past tense, keep it in the past tense. If you're going to do it in the present tense, which can have some benefits because it can give a certain kind of immediacy to the writing, keep the narrative for the whole 750 words in the present. Avoid sensationalist melodrama, so don't have too many things happening. Remember, short stories are understated, and the focus really is on character rather than happenings. Develop your characters, so by the end we should start to view them in a different light. If we feel the same at the end of the story that we did at the start of the story about your characters, then you haven't done a very good job. So it's all about characterization and development of character, please. When you complete your narrative, it's a good idea to do it in a kind of open-ended way to give the sense that, well, this story could have gone on and developed into quite other avenues. So finish your narrative in an open-ended rather than a closed way. Try to avoid cliche at all costs. Cliche means sort of tired, predictable expressions. She was running around like a headless chicken. That's a good example of a cliche. You've heard it so many times that when you hear somebody say it, you don't actually picture a headless chicken. because it's just become one of those tired old expressions. So your job as a short story writer is to be using language in fresh, innovative ways and not drawing upon kind of tired cliches. Variety is important. So varying your lexis, your vocabulary that you're using. Also, variety in your sentences as well. Your sentence function, so declaratives, exclamatives, imperatives, interrogatives, but also sentence types as well. Sometimes simple sentences, sometimes minor sentences, sometimes complex sentences, and sentence length. So lots of variety in your sentences, and also maybe lots of variety in your paragraph lengths as well. You probably would have been taught when you were doing your GCSE descriptive writing, throw in occasionally a short one-sentence paragraph. That's not a bad idea to do on this short story as well. So vary your paragraph length. This is not an essay that you're writing. It's got to have variety. And finally, write concisely, because after all, you do only have 750 words. So don't blather. If you could use 5 words rather than 15 words, that's best. So it's best to be concise. Let's just have a look at a couple more examples. Let's think about this idea of being dramatic. What about this? He and his 2 children were hiding upstairs in terror. The man kicked down the door and shouted in their faces, "Blah! There's lots of action going on there. We've got the word terror. It's a frightening situation. We've got the man being aggressive and shouting in their faces." Is it dramatic? Well, not really. I would argue that the following is much more dramatic. The knock on the door rattled the wind chime in the hall. The lean figure in the frosted glass window seemed vaguely familiar. Now that is actually, for my money, more dramatic than the first one, which is too out there and obvious and in your face. Remember, what you're trying to do on a short story is understated. So we have this suggestion of somebody at the door. We have the visual images of the wind chime. We hear the knock on the door. We have an interesting pre-modifying adjective like lean. We have the detail of the frosted glass window. We have the inferred kind of feelings of the character, seemed vaguely familiar. All of that is more dramatic. Okay, so do what's in the red there rather than what's in the black. And then finally, which generalizes and which specifies. The car park was cold and deserted. Cars went past with music blaring. What do you think about that as a piece of creative writing? It's bland, isn't it? The post-modifying adjectives cold and deserted are bland. We don't get an image of the car park very much. We've got this word car here. We've got a repetition of the word car, which is a hypernym, Hypernym. It's a general kind of word. Went past is a boring use of a verb. Music, what is it? Is it Eminem? Is it Mozart? We don't know. And blaring is cliched. Okay, so whilst that piece of writing there is clear and it's written in standard English, it's actually quite boring. Compare with this. The tarmac glistened in the rain. A red Audi snarled around the corner, an electronic beat throbbing like a palpitation of the heart. That is much, much better. The tarmac glistened in the rain gives me something that I can actually see as a reader. And glistened itself, listen to the sound of it, like the consonants that's used there with the sibilant sound, gives me the sense of something that's glistening. Notice the specificity here. It's not just saying cars, it's saying a red Audi. So that's telling me already as a reader, I'm beginning to infer things about that car and about the owner of the car. Notice the anthropomorphic use of snarled around the corner. So it's describing this inanimate object as if it's some kind of animal. Snarled. And an electronic beat throbbing. Okay, so I'm getting a sense of what kind of music, what genre of music is coming through. And we've also got a piece of figurative language there, like a palpitation of the heart. Okay, so the simile at the end of this creates a kind of sinister, menacing kind of feeling. Okay, so on these example slides that I've shown you, it's the bits in red, that's the kind of thing that you need to be achieving in your short story. So you need to take your time, you need to stop writing down obvious things, and you need to be carefully constructing the effects so that the reader is left to infer things. I can't wait to read your drafts. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, and I hope these short stories are really going to bear fruit. Thank you.